This video is available on BitSuite and Odyssey. Join me there for exclusive content. It's been a while since I began collecting PC parts, and ever since then I've collected quite a few pieces of hardware, including graphics cards. Granted, my collection is not all that impressive compared to some others, but there are some pieces I'm rather proud of. Let's go check them out. Let's start with the Radeon HD 3850. Though it was mid-range, it had pretty good performance, especially for the price, and it was my go-to card whenever I was building a computer for someone that needed one. As for its collectible value, it's not particularly high. In fact, you can find such cards for under 20 bucks. From the same era, we have the 3870, a higher-end model. Much like the previous one, this offered high-end performance for affordable prices. Though I'd argue it's no more collectible than the 3850 is, its prices can be a bit moderate. And of course that depends on the variant as well. Next up we have the relatively modern GT 1030. Due to the times we live in, this card is moderately relevant despite its age. For this reason it can be a bit expensive online, even though it has absolutely no collectible value. Next up we have this pile of cockroach cards. The FX5200, the ATI Radeon 9250, I got an X300, the 6200 Turbo Cache, and of course another 5200. Yeah, let's leave this behind. Let's go to something more interesting. This is the NX 6800GS, and it's quite substantial. This was a later iteration of the 6800 GT, which I used to own, but this one's better. Not only it has higher core clocks than the GT, it was also cheaper. As far as collectability is concerned, you wouldn't think by just looking at it, but it's quite collectible and their prices are high. Anyway, this is a salvaged card, so I didn't pay anything for it. Next up we have this weird thing, the Msi Mxr. From what I was able to find, this is a professional card intended for workstation use, and it's not particularly collectible or sought after. You can find them very cheap online. Moving on, we have two mid-range ATIs from two different generations. The one in the back is an MSI X1650, while the one in the front is an Asus A9550. Both of them were excellent choice for a cheap gaming PC for their time, and one would argue that they were better choices than the Nvidia equivalents. As far as collectability goes, both cards are fairly common and by no means gonna break your bank. I was seriously contemplating putting the next card into the pile of cockroach cards. And that's because this card has no value at all. It performs poorly on 90s Windows games, and its compatibility with DOS is very poor. But alas, it's quite a bit older and it doesn't fit with the other misfits. Avoid unless you want a collectible item. The next card might seem normal, and you know what, it kinda is. Except for one little detail. This card was made by Intel. Essentially what this is Intel's onboard graphics chip on a separate board. It's an interesting curiosity, but beyond that there's nothing more to it. it's not really collectible, and besides that, there's no reason to put it on a retro gaming system. Next up, I have a small assortment of Series Logic cards. After a brief research, I was surprised to find out that these cards are very compatible with old DOS games, and they would be excellent for an old DOS gaming PC. So if you're building one, you can't go wrong with this Series Logic. Though buyers beware, though they are plentiful and easy to find, their prices can be on the higher side. Another brand that has been strongly associated with DOS compatibility is S3. In fact, the S3 Verge is the go-to card for DOS compatibility. And many experienced retro computer builders will tell you that you should get one. Of course, you shouldn't write off its younger AGP sibling, the Trio, which is just as capable in DOS compatibility. In any case, both models are very easy to find and they're dirt cheap. This card is called SIS. It allows you to do heaps of exciting stuff like displaying the operating system, using Word, Excel, accounting software. It is exciting! And moving on, this is the swan song of Matrox, the G550. It is a rather unremarkable card, very weak, not ideal for video games, even old ones. Thanks to some unfounded rumors, at the time of its release it was quite hyped, unjustifiably so. If you really want one, you can find a cheap one quite easily. The next card is the ATI Radeon DDR, and unfortunately is broken, and I think it's because of the capacitors. As you can see, one is punctured. Hopefully it's just that and it's easily fixable. As far as the card goes, it was Radeon Genesis, the first Radeon card. It was by no means the best performing card of its time, but it was a decent alternative. But most importantly, it was a stepping stone for what was to come. Now, if you want one, good luck. Of course, what was to follow after the DDR was this, the ATI Radeon 8500. For the first time in memory, ATI was ahead, even from Nvidia. In 2001, this was the flagship card to have. I love how delightfully crowded the board is, and it also feels quite substantial. Yes, I know, you want one, but you know what? Good luck again. The next card is one of my proudest finds in a salvaged computer ever, the PowerVR Cairo, also known as the 3D Prophet 4000. It was a card aimed at the value for money market. It had decent performance at a low cost. Now, if you want one, they're not the hardest card to find, but they can be quite expensive, especially the 64MB version, much like the one you see here. The next card is another favorite piece of my collection, the 3D Prophet 2 Ti, which essentially is a GeForce 2 Ti. I got this as a substitute to the GeForce 2 Ultra, which is impossible to find. They don't have many differences, this one just has slightly lower memory clocks. I got very lucky to find this variant because they are very expensive and very hard to find. But I got it in a local ad for 15 euros, while they usually go for over 100. If you yourself want a Ti, they are not very hard to find, but the 64MB models can go for a modest amount of money. Next up, we have the Riva series. Let's take things chronologically. This is the Riva 128, released in 1997, and it was arguably one of the best cards of its time. If you watched my last PC openings video, you'll know I got this card from a salvaged computer. And if you want one, they're not hard to find, and I wouldn't call them outrageously expensive. In 1998 it was superseded by this, the Riva TNT, which was another powerhouse for the time. It went toe-to-toe with a 3DFX Voodoo 2, and in some cases it even came out on top. If you're interested, they're easy to find and they're quite cheap. Next in line was the TNT2, and here I have the Vanta LT M64. This particular variant, it's possibly the smallest card I have ever seen. It's no slouch, however. It might not look like much, but I was able to run Free Space 2 on this card, and that game is a powerhouse. Getting a Vanta LT might not be too difficult. They're cheap and you can easily find them. However, I'm not too sure about this particular variant. It might be a bit harder to find, and it might be more expensive than the rest of them. This next variant is the more characteristic example. The non-Vanta LT regular TNT2 M64 was a mid-range solution. This variant by Elsa is a bit unusual for reasons I'm not gonna go into right now. If you want one, they're plentiful and easy to find, and that's on top of being cheap. At long last we reach the final batch, the Voodoos. I will start with the Voodoo 3's 2000s, of which I have two. The one in the front was just another one of my proud finds in one of my PC opening videos, while the one in the back was given to me alongside a batch of hardware, and as far as I understand, it doesn't work. Unfortunately, even this fairly common mid-range model can cost a lot of money online. They are very sought after and highly collectible. Last, but certainly not least, we got the Voodoo 2. Back in '98, it was the card to have. No wait, two of these were the cards to have. Unfortunately, they couldn't output 2D graphics, so you needed a card that could do 2D graphics, which meant if you had two of those working in SLI, you needed 3 cards, and that could get very expensive. I'm very fortunate to have this card. A kind-hearted user in a forum offered to send me this card in order for me to build my first retro gaming system. If you want to get one for yourself, unfortunately they're quite expensive, though not particularly difficult to find. And so, we've reached the conclusion of this video. That was my entire collection of graphics cards. Granted, since I started working on this video, I acquired 2 or 3 more. In any case, I am moving, so I won't be making any videos for a while. But if you're new, you can always watch my backlog. And you can always subscribe for when I start making videos again. This has been Retro Amateur, thanks for watching.